Day 4 of the August 99 10-day retreat in Springwater. A very warm night and a very cool morning. Not interfering with each other. Gray sky, not revealing blue or sun. A dog barking. Sound of crickets and a bird. The group meeting last night. Before getting into that, just a few words about group meetings. Some people say at times, also just got a letter to that on that topic. These group meetings, I have a hard time with them. You talk about anger, but it's about something in the past. People telling stories. Where is the presence? I tell you where the presence is. It's right here in the listening. In this amazing capacity of human beings, not always, maybe not most of the time, but at times, to listen to each other, to hear what somebody says, and not just the words, the whole context of that person's way and expression, and entering into it in a way too hard to describe, almost as though it was happening to oneself but not affected by it. Somebody describes a panic attack, and one listens and one can feel what the person is trying to express. Also, the brain supplying from its memory storage incidents of one's own experience, which fall in line with what is being said, and how one dealt with it or didn't deal with it, and sharing that. You don't have to be angry right now to look at anger. And the fact that the brain can evoke past incidents of anger, either happening to oneself or observing in each other or in our relationship, the fact that the brain has that capacity does not mean that one is dreaming or living in the past. It is possible to look at memory in the present with an astonishing clarity when there is no axe to grind for oneself. Just inquiring together, wondering, and the brain not being dead, and yet not ruling the conversation, just supplying what is needed in the presence of openness and listening and perception. Now to the main topic of last night's group. It was honesty. It touched some people. This questioning, this demand for honesty, which we impose upon ourselves and others impose upon us, and the difficulties with it. Much more came to mind after the talk yesterday, which had remained unsaid, and a lot of it got said in the group. One has this great value to be honest to other people about how one feels, about oneself, and about the others. And that ought to be expressed honestly. We say to ourselves and to each other, we agree on it. But honestly, do we know ourselves? Do we know how we feel right now? We think we do. We know the surface bubbles that want to burst into expression. We may be angry at someone, what they said, how they say it, their gestures, and wish to express that anger, or feel we ought to be able to. But is it really what the person said that makes us angry? Or is there maybe other deeper emotions churning? Is one jealous of that person? Envious of their looks, of their age, of their capacities, of their popularity? Came to mind because a case like this was mentioned to me a while ago, where this was all hidden. So, not to be too sure that we really know our feelings, even though the surface seems obvious. Personally, I haven't done this much feeling expressing. It's so hard to catch it because it changes like the weather. And also, it's so complex. This is how one feels, but one also feels that way and this way. And above all, one does not want to create new images in other people's minds about oneself. If it was possible that we could communicate with each other and not begin to store this stuff, it may be easier. But very often experience has shown what one has said gets stuck in someone else's mind, like a tombstone. I'm not just talking from own experience. Other people have told me that. So it's a very delicate and tricky matter to reveal one's feelings with all the consequences of that, potential, possible, or actual consequences. Because that's how we have learned habitually to relate to each other, is on the basis of images we have of each other. And we gather them up, the brain gathers them up because it wants to have predictability, certainty, safety in its relations. And that's where this image building tremendously helps the brain to already know how something is, how somebody is. Because it's here, a picture, a remembrance, to which action follows. Also this thing of telling you honestly how I feel, does this become for a person a new image? I am the honest teller of my feelings, and serving that image, I'm really more honest in telling you about my feelings than you are, and clinging to that. And is one aware of that? And honestly revealing that part too? If it comes into view? Sometimes it can happen. It happens when we feel really, truly safe with each other. And that takes trust, and trust also grows out of experience that, yes, it has been safe in the past. If it has not, this is how little children learn to hide their feelings, because it has not been safe to express them. Somebody mentioned it last night in the group, saying to someone, really honestly, I want to hear how you feel about me. Tell me honestly. And after 10 minutes, she had it. Was, I forget now, hurt or angry. Or telling somebody honestly how one feels, that you are a bore. You are not interesting. You are usurping the group, the conversation. Does one want to embarrass somebody in front of a group like that? Telling them that? But this is how I may feel. I mentioned it to some people in the past. We never used to have group meetings. There's no such thing as group meetings in Zen training. Heaven forbid. It just doesn't belong there. That would be the antithesis. And this is sort of programmed into one too. But people were asking for it, sometimes demanding it. Let's not just have Toni do all the talking. Let's talk together and have a group discussion, dialogue, where we can express things. And we mulled it over, and eventually we said, okay, let's experiment with it. Let's try it out. And one of the first experiments with it happened that a person who was new to the center and has never been back since very quickly took over the group meeting, teaching people, sort of guru-like. It was very awkward. And it took me a long time before I could say something like, could we let some other people say something too? And in the group was a woman who I deeply respect. She is a seasoned, long-time sitter and a meditation teacher herself. I thought, oh my God, what does she think of us now? What we've come up with. And the next opportunity for a private meeting, she came in. And my heart pounded. Honestly. And she said, this was the most amazing experience last night when this man was talking. I was so repelled and so angry and upset over it that I didn't hear one word he said. showed me a lot about myself. I just breathed a sigh of relief. It is possible to learn from anything, in ourselves and in each other, if we're open, if there is this energy to look and discover honestly. So what do we mean ultimately by honesty? Beyond what we have been talking about in the talk and in the group. Maybe we touched upon it in the group. Is it possible for a human being so heavily conditioned and programmed and defended to listen free from that? To listen and speak, I'm not saying absolutely, totally free from it, but enough space to express without being a target, to listen without being a vulnerable target that could be hit any time. And without, earlier I said, without an axe to grind, without needing something from this. In other words, no self-absorption or self-enclosure, self-defense or self-consciousness. That's in abeyance. It's not eradicated or deleted forever, but it can be in abeyance so that the vision is clear. The ears are clear. We said earlier in the retreat, when we use one sense word, we mean them all. That's openness. No division among the senses. To hear what you're saying and not take it personal. Immediately get into the picture. Why does he say this about me? I'm not like that. Or being hurt because I'm not the way I should be. This tiedness to our images. It cannot be stressed enough and watched enough to make it very clear what a straitjacket it is. What energy it takes to defend the image, to maintain it, to repair it, promote it. In this delusional feeling or delusive feeling that this is what I am, this is what is my body and soul. Is this where honesty emerges without being honesty anymore? That word then is too conventional. And can we at times come to that alone and in a group? Whereas, as one person pointed out, in really looking into oneself, it may not be necessary to express it at all. It's no big deal. Which doesn't mean one shouldn't express to each other when one works together and has frictions together. Not to stuff it, that this person said too. Stuffing something for fear of saying it does no one any good. It comes out the back door, or somebody said it explodes. Eventually. Maybe at an even less opportune time. So we have to learn to talk to each other and listen to each other in a new way. And experience has shown that it is possible. And pointing these things out, as happens in a talk or in a group, does help to see something when it happens, to become more aware of it, to notice it more readily. We have talked about it. We've looked at it together, even though the anger may not happen right now or the hurt. But that hurt and anger can spring up any time and may be seen in a better way, in a more wise, intelligent way, than just running with it so blindly. And all the conventional justifications or condemnations of it. With which I'm not saying everybody should come to group meetings. It's up to each one. That's the beauty of Springwater. You can take it or leave it. Accept your job. Some people, every once in a while somebody comes and says, I took this week to have a vacation. And they will tell me afterwards it was the most wonderful vacation I ever had. And not necessarily participating in all of what goes on, which can be quite rattling. Upsetting the apple cart. Sunshine. Where did it come from? Or was it always there? Someone mentioned to me in a private meeting sort of wrestling with this whole matter of ego, self, me. The difficulty of getting it, of seeing it, is sort of like it seemed for a while like a tight golf ball in which are all millions of little threads wrapped up. And trying to see that. And he was holding the hand out like this, which is what we've been talking about, watching oneself or things as the observer who has the duty or the inclination or the interest to watch oneself. There's a lot of sort of duty in this too. One hears these talks and one thinks, well, I ought to be doing this now. This is what they do here. And I ought to watch this. And it becomes a real chore, a lot of effort to watch the ego. And then he said, but you know, this ego is not just a little golf ball. It is so vast. It permeates this whole being. The way I walk, the way I talk, the way I lift up my hand and think and do and react. How can it be seen when it is so all-pervasive? You know, this takes awareness to come up with a statement like that. There's a lot of watching has gone into it. Awareing. The way one holds one's face. Frown, one may not notice it. Frown or tension around the mouth and nose. And then a moment of coming to. This comes into view, it comes into feel. One notices it, feels it. And with that, it can relax. And out pops some thought. I shouldn't, how bad they are, what they did to me, and that holds the face tense. Now, I'm not saying this can always relax, but it can happen by awareing physically held tension may relax and thoughts, dreams, fantasies pop out that were holding the body tight, tense, pained. The way our body has grown and formed itself, it's not all inheritance and not all imitation, it's also these thoughts. Then why else would it be that little relaxed babies, little children, I love to take their arm and wave their hand, and there's just nothing that's tensing. It just flops around, soft. And then as one watches one's friends' children, one's own children, one's grandchildren grow up, all of a sudden the shoulders tighten up. Or the gait becomes less light and delightful. The face. The thoughts about ourselves, how we are or should be or shouldn't be, affect this body thoroughly. That's why body work is very helpful. It draws attention to these tight spots and maybe it can be relaxed if there's also some insight into what holds it. I remember a young man who used to sit with us in Buffalo. He was from the Zen Center. And then he couldn't do anything with this stuff anymore, and he went into Rolfing and took, I think, 2 or 3 sets in a row and there's, I think, 10 or 20 Rolfing sessions in one set, and he just had to go all the way with that. And then he once appeared at the door and he said, with all this Rolfing, I can feel my body is pulling back into its habitual defensive stance. I don't know whether he said defensive justice, and he demonstrated. So there has to be insight along with some quite violent body work. Rolfing is quite violent. I feel it this way, and yet it's very helpful. And then there's some that's very gentle. So coming back to this discovery that this self-thought, self-net, he said it's not just a brainy network, it's the whole body. Well, I hope I haven't expressed that it's just a brainy network and the body is sort of out of it. Of course it is involved, totally. If we could see the lines of connection or could feel them, they're so clear, one thought and it goes right into the big toe. All over. And then the fear of this feeling and more contractions. So, because it is so vast, and as this person felt, it's really unseeable because it permeates the whole thing. It's true, it cannot be seen from the outside because we are totally involved in this, it seems. There is no outside point from which to watch this. And we don't want to hear somebody else tell us about ourselves either. That doesn't set right. It's not complete. the vision, the awareing has to come from the inside. Not as an observer, but living this whole thing clearly, or with increasing clarity, increasing presence, awareness. Use whatever word clicks most. And we come upon this and come upon that from the inside. To see the whole thing, you have to be out of it. As long as one is partially in this self-center, with a position, with a defense, with an attachment, one can't see the whole thing. But for moments at a time, we're not talking about length of time. It is given to human beings, ordinary human beings like you and me, to see the whole thing at a glance. The contraction and the freedom. Never mind all the details. It's the whole thing of conditioned existence, which is not blameworthy or to be excused or justified, but to be seen, understood. And once it's seen, it's clearer from moment to moment as we live in this conditioned existence in our daily work and relationships. It becomes clearer and calmer and gentler and maybe a bit more loving toward each other and oneself. I just added that because people always say I have to learn to love myself. I don't quite know what it means unless it means the absence of despising oneself, hating oneself, finding fault with oneself, just seeing oneself as one is. And to watch, maybe right now, in the present, has this thought arisen, how can I get to this point outside of myself? I try to remember now, a thing comes to mind which used to really intrigue me as a child. It was mentioned in our home, and then later I heard it in geometry, Archimedes saying, give me a point in the universe, give me a point, and I will lift the earth out of its angel. What do you say? Out of its, orbit. Orbit, yeah. And a friend of my sister's who was very clever, he made a beautiful painting of this vast space with stars and galaxies, and Archimedes standing there someplace with a huge lever, because it was to explain the mechanics of a lever, and lifting this earth. And I wondered whether I could ever have that space of Archimedes. Be in that space where you see the whole earth. So, is that desire kindled to be outside of oneself so one can see oneself completely? That desire is fueled by image, wanting. Image and wanting always go together. Desire, we talked about it. It was in a private meeting. Desire needs imagery, fantasy, to be aroused and then go for it, in fantasy or in quote-unquote real life. But it is pulled from the outside by imagery, and from the inside propelled by discontent, restlessness, boredness. It's so boring, and the mind starts to offer a smorgasbord. of things to get. Clothes, one person say, clothes or a sexual relationship, and off we go. So, and actually this person also mentioned wanting something back that one had, this beautiful freedom, without self-center. Either remembering it or not having experienced it and wanting it as an image. To see that and not fall for it, but to see the operation of desire, fed by image and thought. And waking up to that and seeing it, what's going on right now beside this thing, this drama? And very ordinary things are going on, not very exciting, like breathing, crickets chirping, heart beating, energy tingling throughout the body. No wind in the trees today. No birds. Is that boring? Oh. It can be, particularly as we talk to ourselves about it. Or as the body is so habituated to stimulation, sort of craves for something to keep it going in its habitual mode. But it's not its only mode. Its only possible mode. And that's what we're to discover, not by desiring it, but by listening to boredom. Listening to restlessness. Discontent. Listening to it. Not making a big deal out of it, just not overlaying it with something exciting to think about and want. We're talking right now about sitting here, meditation, and so forth. So, through this amazing phenomenon of insight, awareness, self-centered thoughts and imagery can come into view. Not just the image that has just been heard or needs to be fixed or promoted, but also the effect it has on this whole body, the anxiety it can trigger, the anger it can evoke, or the desires for pleasure. It can become more and more and more transparent, even though in the beginning sometimes people say, I don't know what you're talking about, I feel totally numb. How do you know you feel numb? There's awareness there, some kind of in-touchness. So, you begin with where you are, be in touch with the numbness. And don't call it numbness. Don't call it anything, don't know it. Don't know it, don't tackle it. Attack it or defend it. Just sort of, what is it? As the breath flows, can you hear it? There isn't anyone who can't hear their breath. In and out. And the distant caw. This amazing silence. we will end here for today.